Hi there, Richard here. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between the definition of done and the definition of ready. Now, this video is thanks to a comment in the last video that I published, and the comment was from Pumio. Pumio wrote, "Can you explain more about the differences between the DoR and the DoD in some practical cases, and any tips to make them more transparent and efficient?" Okay, let me give you some answers. So what's the difference between the definition of done and the definition of ready? Well, let's start by talking about what is the definition of done. And the way I like to think about it is it sets the level of quality of the output of a sprint cycle. It helps the team define what that level of quality is. Now, it's typically in the form of a checklist. So for example, on the checklist, you might have the product backlog item has been tested, maybe the acceptance criteria has been met, and the product owner has reviewed and accepted it. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what a DoD is. I've actually got another video where I talk more about it. I'll put a link to it on the screen now and in the description below. But again, think about it as, I like to call it exit criteria. It's controlling the quality of the output of a sprint cycle, which will help your team be consistent, but it will also shed some transparency around what that level of quality is. Now, the definition of ready, on the other hand, is also quality criteria, but not for the output of the sprint cycle. It's not exit criteria. Instead, think of it as entry criteria, or specifying the quality of the input into your sprint cycle. Now, what's the input into your sprint cycle? Well, it's your product backlog items, or more generally speaking, your requirements. So what a definition of ready does is it helps your team define what is the quality of their requirements. What level of detail do they need to bake into their requirements? And typically on a definition of ready, a team might say, okay, the acceptance criteria has been defined. Maybe the product backlog item has been estimated. Perhaps it's been reviewed and socialized with stakeholders. Maybe some accompanying artifacts have been attached, such as business rules or wireframes or prototypes. And so what it does is it allows the team to, similar to the definition of done, achieve a level of consistency with the quality of their requirements. So I should mention that the definition of ready is not a formal artifact within the Scrum framework. You'll notice that there is no mention of the definition of ready in the Scrum guide, like there is the definition of done. So it's very much optional, and I typically use it with teams where they're struggling with product backlog refinement. And you'll know that's the case because your team will be confused, the requirements will be unclear, and they end up building things which perhaps don't really meet the mark, and they need to be reworked again and again, which can be very, very expensive and time consuming. So for those types of teams, I find the definition of ready is a great way to help them understand what they need to do when they're refining their product backlog items and achieve it consistently. Now, let's talk about how you can apply the definition of ready in Jira. In my previous video, I gave some tips on how to help your team complete their definition of done when they're using Jira and Confluence, and the same tips can still be applied to the definition of ready. For example, you can document the definition of ready in Confluence, make sure it's shared with the team, and bring it along to your product backlog refinement session so your team refers to it. You can create subtasks for the definition of ready criteria, or maybe create a custom control. Now, there is another option for those of you who are using a company managed Jira project. Now, the cool thing about a company managed Jira project is you can create not only a Scrum board, but also a Kanban board. Now, a lot of times teams will visualize the work that is occurring inside the sprint. You've got your active sprint board, and you've typically got the columns to do, in progress, and done. But when it comes to your refinement activities, that also can be visualized. And how do you visualize it? In Jira, well, you need to create a Kanban board to visualize everything that occurs before bringing the product backlog item into the sprint. So how do you do it? Well, basically you go to the left panel, you click on the board, and you'll notice at the bottom there is a create board option. You can then create a Kanban board. You will have to add some additional statuses. Common statuses are not refined, in refinement, and then sprint ready, where sprint ready indicates that it can be brought into an upcoming sprint. Now, setting up this Kanban board is quite involved, so I'm not going to cover it in this video. But if you would like me to create a video on how to set up a Kanban board to visualize your definition of ready and your product backlog refinement process, let me know in the comments below and I can create one. So just to wrap up this video, let me give you some final tips on applying the definition of ready. So here's some final tips before we wrap up this video. Firstly, remember your definition of ready does not need to be applied across all product backlog items right from the very get-go. Instead, when I'm coaching teams, I want them to focus on the next 1 to 2 sprints worth of product backlog items. I want them to make sure those requirements are well understood, sufficiently detailed, and appropriately sized. And you'll find that a definition of ready is a great way to do it. The other tip I'll give here is to be careful that your definition of ready doesn't become what we call a stage gate. What's a stage gate? Well, it's basically saying that nothing can progress forwards unless it goes through this gate. And sometimes the definition of ready can become that, where the team will not bring an item into the sprint and start working on it unless the definition of ready has been met. Now, sometimes if we're overly strict with that, it actually will slow the team down. So make sure your definition of ready does not become a stage gate. Now, I often get people getting confused saying, well, how much detail is appropriate? How much information should we bake into our product backlog items? And I like to coach teams on this principle. And the principle we're trying to apply here when it comes to agile requirements is we want to accelerate the delivery of requirements to the team without compromising their understanding or the quality of what they deliver. So the quicker we can deliver requirements to the team, the quicker they can implement it, deliver it to a customer, and obtain some feedback and then learn. And that's what Agile is all about. However, we want to be accelerating the delivery of requirements without sacrificing the understanding of the team or the quality of what they deliver, because of course, if we do, then they're not going to be delivering the right result. So it's about striking the right balance here. If you have too much detail in your product backlog items, you gather too much information, it's actually going to slow things down. You're not going to accelerate the delivery of requirements to the team. But if you have too little detail, then again, the team may deliver something very quickly, but what they deliver may be wrong. And then they need to rework it, and often reworking an implemented solution is time consuming and expensive. So again, it's balancing those two things. How quickly can we get it to the team, and how much detail do we bake into our requirements? Now, if this topic is of interest to you and you want to learn more about the principles behind agile requirements, then go check out my latest course. It's called Mastering Agile Requirements. And in that course, I talk about the principles behind agile requirements. I talk about what themes and epics are, how to break down requirements into smaller ones. I also go through a couple of different formats, the user story format and the job story format. Now, accompanying this course is a product called Feature Library. And Feature Library contains over 200 common requirements that you can reference and copy. So go check it out at featurelibrary.com. DoD.com. You can sign up for more information there, and when you sign up, you get a free sample of the feature library, and you also get access to our upcoming 3-part masterclass on agile requirements, which is completely free. So again, go check it out at featurelibrary.com. So there you have it, the difference between the definition of done and the definition of ready. Now, I'd love to hear if you have applied the definition of ready in Jira. Did you use a Kanban board or subtasks or some other method altogether? I'd love to hear it. Share it with us in the comments below. Lastly, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. We'll have many more videos with helpful tips coming your way. If you found this video helpful, then give us a like, and of course share this with others if you think they will find it useful. Lastly, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.